Welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here. We are diving into a really fascinating, paradigm-shifting analysis of religious history and human behavior today. We're going to look at some uncomfortable but honestly incredibly eye-opening arguments from our source material about how historical teachings were misunderstood and how we can finally break out of a millennia-old cycle. So grab a notebook, because you're definitely going to want to remember this.
Okay, let's dive right into this. What if everything we've been conditioned to do when it comes to saints, prophets, and spiritual figures has actually been completely backward for the last 2 millennia? I know, it's a massive question, but today's material directly challenges our deeply ingrained habits of passive worship. It really asks us to consider the idea that, instead of actively evolving, humanity might have just spent thousands of years stuck in this loop of blindly bowing and begging.
Section 1. The illusion of worship.
Now, according to the source material, the very concept of a Buddha has been profoundly misunderstood. The argument here is that this term was never actually meant to designate some magical deity that we pray to for worldly favors. Instead, the text explains that Buddha was literally introduced as a subject of study. The original intent was for us to use these teachings as a curriculum, to achieve our own ultimate growth and completion. We were supposed to study the Buddha to eventually become like the Buddha, not just endlessly hang on to their coattails.
And the source brilliantly illustrates its main critique here. Over thousands of years, a pretty tragic devolution occurred. On one side, we have active study, researching, questioning, and analyzing to actually better our world. But on the other, we have blind worship, the praying, the begging, the kneeling. The text argues that instead of doing the hard work of applying these teachings, society kind of took the easy way out. We completely stopped analyzing the why and simply started kneeling, relying entirely on the blind acceptance of what the people before us said.
Section 2. Teachers, not deities. So, when you peel back all the mythology, the source material points out that figures like Siddhartha and Jesus were, first and foremost, mortal humans. They were essentially social reformers, completely tailored for the people of their specific eras. The whole intention was for future generations to study their lives, really understand their philosophies, and then take the baton to finish their work in a new era. But, as the analysis suggests, by turning them into untouchable deities high up in the heavens, we conveniently absolved ourselves of the responsibility to actually do that hard work.
Section 3. The Lost History of Religion.
Let's map out how this all builds chronologically. Think about the logistics of the ancient world for a second. Jesus had an incredibly brief public teaching ministry of only about 3 years. Just 3 years. And that was mostly walking from town to town without modern transport. I mean, practically speaking, how much could realistically be established in that time? Later on, the Roman Empire adopted and institutionalized the faith for control. And Siddhartha, he wasn't even worshipped as a deity while he was alive. He was deified a full 500 years later, based almost entirely on passed-down stories and rumors.
And here is a truly fascinating and honestly slightly amusing point about how these texts evolved over time. Many early scriptures literally start with phrases like, "I heard this from someone." It's essentially ancient hearsay, because these passed-down stories were recorded in foreign languages that ordinary people couldn't read. The completely mundane suddenly became mystical. Take washing your feet after a long walk, for example. In plain language, that's just basic hygiene, but shrouded in a misunderstood foreign tongue, suddenly it's a sacred, highly holy ritual. The source argues that a simple language barrier literally created an aura of unearned divinity.
Section 4. The Agony of the Saints.
Let me ask you this. If God, or the Buddha, or your revered ancestors looked down right now and saw humanity doing nothing but blindly bowing, holding festivals, and begging for favors for thousands of years, would they actually be happy? The source's blunt assertion here is a resounding no. The argument is that centuries of spiritual stagnation and constant clinging would drive absolutely any teacher crazy. They don't want us indefinitely tied to them. They want us to grow up.
The text outlines a core belief here. The true purpose of a descendant is to finish the work our ancestors started. Our fundamental role in the world isn't to perpetually hold ceremonies on our knees. The idea is that once we've learned the basics, we are supposed to stand up, look at the unsolved problems in the real world, and actively go fix them.
Section 5. Korea's Unique Modern Destiny.
Wake up, people! If you don't awaken, humanity is forever asleep. Now that is a dramatic, urgent call to action from the text. It's directed specifically at the people of South Korea, referring to them as heavenly descendants. The source argues that if this specific demographic doesn't break their old habits and step up to lead a global intellectual and spiritual awakening, the rest of the world will basically remain spiritually asleep forever.
Now, what's really interesting about this period in history is how the source backs up that claim. The text looks specifically at post-World War II South Korea. This period marked the very first time since creation where education and culture were completely opened up to absolutely everyone. The strict class divides between nobility and commoners entirely dissolved. Men and women gained equal access to learning, and the floodgates to global culture and knowledge were thrown wide open. According to the text, this unprecedented equalization wasn't just some historical accident. It happened so this specific generation would finally have the tools to research these ancient truths and redefine them for the modern future.
Section 6. Question everything. Ask about anything under heaven. The source presents this as the ultimate defining mantra we need to adopt. When traditional knowledge, age-old scriptures, or just regular societal norms completely fail to solve the real, practical problems we face today, we cannot just accept defeat. The philosophy here is that active, relentless inquiry is literally our only path forward. We have to start asking questions about absolutely everything.
If existing knowledge leaves you frustrated and stuck, the speaker's philosophy says you absolutely must speak up. In fact, it argues that it is perfectly fine, necessary even, to demand answers from the universe, from God, or from nature itself. Silently suffering and passively waiting for a miracle to happen is viewed as a failure to use our own human intellect. If things just aren't working, it is our absolute right to demand clarity so we can actually forge a better path.
So what does this all mean for us? If our history really is built on centuries of misunderstanding, and our true purpose is to study, to question, and to evolve, rather than just bow and obey, what questions will you ask today? What accepted truths in your own life are you finally going to investigate? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep analyzing, keep questioning, and never stop learning. Catch you next time.